Hey, this is Swedenborg Live. My name is Curtis Chance, and I'll be your host, and I'm really glad to get to do that. And really, the reason that I'm glad, beyond getting to hang out with all of you, is that I get to hang out with this very special panel of people who are going to take this conversation we're about to have, not just to another level, but to another level on top of another level. Okay, hey, everyone, how you doing?
Hi, this is Karin Childs, Community Manager and writer at Off the Left Eye. Welcome. So glad to have you here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cara Dom. I'm muddle around in the Latin having to do with this show, and I love responding to your comments underneath our shows. Happy to be here.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chelsea Odner, Director of Content Strategy and a writer for Off the Left Eye and host of Inside Off the Left Eye.
You know that somebody is smart when they're like, I'll just muddle around in some Latin. I muddle around. If I was to say I'm going to muddle around in Latin, that would mean I would say carpe diem. And like sort of know what that means, but I digress. Let's do some question and answer. Everyone, if you've never hung out with us before, thank you for joining. Get in that YouTube chat, and all we're going to talk about is whatever you all want to talk about. So write your queries in there, and we are going to give them conversation. In rare cases, we're going to come up with an answer to them. Otherwise, we'll just have a good chat around them. So in order to get ourselves and yourselves and everyone in the right headspace for that, let's get a little bit of Swedenborg. Let's out of a little dropper, put some of that into the water and get the right parts per million here so that we can shift our focus away from all the buzz of external materialistic natural life and into this contemplation of things that are eternal and things that are the soul behind the machine that we see. This is from New Jerusalem 209. It relates to the episode we did on Monday because it's about baptism, the ritual of baptism, and what is it and what gives it powers. This is New Jerusalem 209. Baptism imparts neither faith nor salvation, but testifies that both will be received by those who are regenerated. Washings represented purifications from evils and falsities. So that's the work that we're doing. That ritual is a signpost, but it's just pointing you in the direction of course, get rid of stuff that's mean and not true. And then there's all this goodness waiting to happen. So we're in that headspace, and we're going to use that as a signpost for your ability to support us today as well. So 209 is that number. Our goal, our weekly goal is going to be $209 raised. We're not for profit, so none of this would happen without you. And we thank you for week after week making this possible. If we can raise $209 during this show, well, this show will go on indefinitely for 15 more minutes. And all you have to do is go to offtheLeftEye.com/donate. And let's see if we can get there. Thank you so much. Okay. We asked you all a question this week. As you're getting your questions in the chat, we'll give you what the answers from the audience were. Our reflection question of the week was, what was a time when you felt initiated into a new spiritual path? Oh yeah, I do want, where does this show up in particular in people's lives? So Karin, community manager, what's the community saying?
I love the variety that we get in the responses. There's so many different ways to hold this in different people's lives. And so here are some excerpts from that. We narrow it down to an excerpt so we can fit more of the variety in. So here are some of the responses from our audience of when you felt initiated into a new spiritual path. Recovery, 1994. Mm-hmm. Congratulations. It is directly proportional to my ability to go deeper into myself. Yeah, that's where you find God. When I read Secrets of Heaven, Volume 1 and 2 by Swedenborg, I never heard before of the inner meaning of all the word. And I wondered, why is there so much blindness? Yeah, there's so much pleasure in there. When I realized true repentance is to show sincere, heartfelt love for our fellow sisters and brothers. Yes, yes. After my life fell apart, I felt abandoned by God, but my pastor recommended an NDE story that happened to reference a certain Swedish mystic.
Wait, who?
So glad that led you here. My dreams have initiated me to whatever I was going to be facing. Cool. That was part of Swedenborg's initiation. The loss of my husband when he died in my arms, thoughts of the afterlife, guilt and pain, prayers helped me. And through his death, I felt a spiritual awareness. Oh, so sorry for that loss, but yeah, sometimes loss really starts a new part of your journey. When I realized I was a twin flame, real love surpasses all understanding. So true. It feels that way every time I wake up to something I do that is hurting someone I loved, and then feel regret and change my way. Yeah, that can be a real shift. Becoming a Christian in my early 20s, I made a promise to God that I would stop drinking and doing drugs. I've been clean and sober now for over 20 years. Wow, congratulations. And yeah, that promise, like in baptism, it's a commitment. I felt a powerful calling on my heart to make amends for the Lord's sake. After following through with it, I felt an equally palpable sense of relief and joy. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. When I found Off the Left Eye and learned of what God showed Swedenborg, God has always been there for me, sending his angels to help me. My goal now is to be useful. Oh, that's awesome. Knowledge of the other side, that gave me different perspectives. Still struggling with some questions. Yeah, me too. The questions will keep going, but that's awesome. Shortly after my husband passed away, I began having dreams and experiences where I felt his presence. These left me with such a feeling of love and peacefulness. Oh, that's beautiful. And so sorry for your loss. When I had a total emotional, psychological, and spiritual breakdown, somehow what followed the darkness was exactly what was meant to happen. Oh, it's amazing. That can really be a turning point when everything seems to fall apart sometimes. I've had a few experiences recently where it feels like I can see everything at once. Wow, cool. The big perspective. And finally, I met our guru who explained the love of God, and we experienced him in our day-to-day life. Oh, that's great. Sometimes it is a guide or a teacher that shows up in your life. Those are so wonderful. And I encourage people to go to our social media pages and read the full versions and some more. It's just wonderful, the variety. Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for that, the honesty and the clarity around that. And I think that's useful because we can start to look at similar events as potential path starters in our own life. So right on. Okay, I know that Karin, you had said, yeah, I still have questions too. Let's explore what our questions are, particularly around this next topic. Colin Vickers asks, would y'all share a brief summary of the main points in the discourse around whether or not the Lord can eventually raise hellish spirits into heaven? What are each of your opinions and why? Good. Let's start out like no cream, no sugar. Let's go right to some highly caffeinated stuff. So yeah, so we got to let's lay out everything that Swedenborg says, and then how do you connect the dots?
Yeah, I have a number I can read from Divine Providence as part of starting the conversation. And first, Swedenborg does emphasize that it's not going from hell to heaven, or making a movement in the spiritual world is not simply a matter of changing your mind. It's not simply like, oh, I get it now. I'm sorry, I'm going to change, because you don't go to hell unless you've already rejected all the wake-up calls that were offered to you. There's through our whole earthly life, and then after death, there's the life review, and there's just many, many, many ways that God and angels call to you to wake up and to offer you the chance to choose a change in direction. And in our show called How You End Up in Heaven and Hell, we present that it's compared to the digestive system, like food going through a human body has all these different points at which the contents of the food can enter the body. And similarly, going through the world of spirits, there's many different points in a person's process in which they can enter heaven. And it's just a matter of like, it's all according to willingness on the part of the person. God is calling everybody to heaven, but God does not force anyone to go to heaven. And so it's completely according to the person's willingness. And if you've ever been in a state or known somebody in a state of saying, hey, why don't you forgive this person? And they say, no, I do not. Like you can't just, if somebody doesn't want to let go of feeling revengeful or feeling hatred or something, so it becomes a part of who they are. So in Swedenborg spiritual science, people build their spiritual body out of what they want, basically. And so it's actually a very, it's not an easy thing to go from completely choosing, I want everything to go my way and I hate everybody and, I want to get everybody back. That's the state of hell. It's not just an easy, like, oh, now I'll change my mind. So it's a big deal. I just want to lay that out there because it's not like people can have an impression of people in hell saying, oh, I'm sorry, will you let me out now? And God's not letting them out, but it's so not that. It's God always saying, how about you come out of that state of mind? And people saying, no, I don't want to. I deserve to be mad. I deserve to hate everybody. I deserve. So you got to first understand that because it's just so key to having this discussion. But there are places in Swedenborg's writings, and I'm going to read here, that God never stops trying to pull people out of hellish states of mind. And this is,
you already have your number at the ready?
I do. Yes. Divine Providence 337. He's talking about the reason that everything divine providence does is done out of pure mercy is that divine essence is pure love. This is what is working through divine wisdom. And this working is what we call divine providence. And he says the pure love is mercy, A, because it's at work with everyone in the whole world. And by our nature, we're all incapable of doing anything on our own. B, it is at work with the evil and the unjust and with the good and the just alike. C, it is leading people who are in hell and rescuing them from it. D, it is constantly struggling with them in hell and fighting for them against the devil, that is, against the evils of hell. E, that's why it came into the world. It meaning divine providence came into the world in the form of Jesus Christ. Why it came into the world and underwent temptations, even to the final one, the suffering on the cross. And F, it is constantly at work to make the unclean clean and the insane sane. So it is constantly laboring out of pure mercy. And so that is just talking about this ongoing process that God is never just giving up and saying, okay, that person, I've done everything I can, God is constantly working at that. And there are places in Swedenborg's writings where he seems to be stating, once you're in hell, you don't come out. And other places he's stating like, and when people do finally come out of hell, so there's different way it's phrased. But to me, the message is we have to understand, like, we can get ourselves into a hellish state of mind and just be stuck there until we're willing to get out. So if we're like, nobody else can decide that for us. I mean, God is constantly calling. So it's like a public service announcement to like, pay attention, like an addiction. Like if you the question isn't like, okay, can I do hard drugs all my life and then later just get out? The public service announcement is getting addicted to things, and in this case, getting addicted to evil. You'll get to a point where you don't want to give it up. So anyway, I don't know if I've answered the question, but it's complicated. But I think the main thing is God is never stops working to get people out. So if God wants everyone in heaven, wouldn't it be that eventually people get pulled that direction?
Yeah, I think it's great that I think you give a lot of good answers in there, but don't answer the question all the way, because then what are we going to talk about? What are the rest of us going to talk about? No, there were so many great points that you made in there. That number in divine providence was awesome, and I'd love to unpack that more. But I want to kick it over to Chelsea. Before I do, though, Colin, we have to say thanks to Colin. He made a donation. We are now off to the races in trying to reach our goal of $209 to get our extra 15 minutes. So cool. All right. That was a great opening of the discussion on this. And I'm in agreement with a lot of what you said, Karin. Chelsea, where do you want to go next?
Yeah, well, it's good if we're going to get that extra time, because we might need this whole hour just to talk about this question. No.
Incentive. Yeah.
But I had a couple of thoughts. One is just like this question came up at our dinner table just the other night from my, young children who are like, wait, can you ever get out of hell? Like, would somebody who why, why would it be forever? And even just reflecting on like what happens in my body when I think about this question, I feel like part of that impulse, and I don't know if that's shared with Colin and whoever else is, thinking about this, is like, there's this impulse of like, that's so wrong. Like something's gotta, like, of course the Lord, somebody isn't just locked in hell forever, or, there's gotta be a way. And like, even though it's like, I can't, my thoughts are not your thoughts, like God has a much bigger perspective than me. I feel like there's gotta be some of that mercy that Karin was talking about that is at the seed of that feeling in me that's like, something's not right here, even if I can't wrap my head around it. But I think also we get concerned about things that we don't understand. And when we do understand them, they make a lot more sense. And so sort of on the other side, or not really other side, but just something that is interesting that I think about, that I include in my mind when I'm pondering this question at different times, is it kind of gets back to a principle that Swedenborg talks about, that when he's talking about what a judgment is, and this, like when we get to the point, and he sort of will describe it that when we're in the world of spirits, when we're in between, we're kind of a mixed bag. We don't know, that's when the Lord the Lord has taken every opportunity, like Karin said, to make us decide that what we want to be us is all of that goodness and truth that we've been building up in our life all along. And we want to let go of we want to be freed from the evil and falsity. When we're in that process, it goes to a point where it finally gets to an end point. Like there's a reckoning, and it's like, and if we're going to go with whatever even little minuscule bit of goodness or truth that we have in us, if that's what we're going to choose, then that becomes the dominant thing, and it rejects everything evil and false out of it. And that sort of like process is what sort of spiritually brings us into heaven. And similarly, if we get to that point where we're going to choose hell or what's evil and false, then that evil and falsity rejects everything good and true. And that's what kind of makes the final, like, okay, we are aligning ourselves with hell, because, it's like two magnets that you just can't put goodness and evil or truth and falsity near each other for any sustainable amount of time. They have to just get apart from each other because they're opposite. And so Swedenborg has these interesting quotes that I don't have in my mind right now, where, something that is that mixed combination can't last forever. It needs to reach that peace. And the peace comes, even if it's a sort of insane satisfaction, it comes when it finally gets to just be evil and false and just like, and gets rid of any of that awkward goodness that was getting in the way, versus, on the other end, you're finally relieved of like that evil and falsity isn't around you anymore. You can just rest. That's the Lord's rest, is when we are in that, when we've made that alignment. And so there's something like, kind of like, it's if you've gotten to that point, it's like hard to imagine ever deciding to get out of that, but because I don't think like mistakes happen, it's not like The Good Place where like people end up in the wrong place, like Karin was saying. And And so, yeah, and another little complicating factor is in Swedenborg's works, he will say he's talking about hell, but what he's describing of what he's seeing in hell, when you sort of take in the totality of his works, you realize he's really talking about the lower earth, or like this place that isn't really hell, but it's sort of where people are still figuring themselves out. And so he'll say things that are happening in hell that really wouldn't be happening if it was like hell according to his definition of that like clarity, that like judgment that happens. And anyway, so it's interesting stuff to kind of feel through. Oh yeah, and the one last thought was that it's been said very pithily to me before, where it's like, can the Lord eventually raise people out of hell? Like, yes, as soon as they choose to. Like, everyone in hell is free to leave whenever they want. So, and that's the trick. It's whenever they want. And that doesn't really happen. So, yeah.
Right. Got a lot of great stuff to think about there. I want to get Kara's input, but I can't until I acknowledge Jonathan, who gave to our organization here and gave to support this message reaching the next person. So we're up to $75. We are
Thank you.
speeding towards our goal. Thank you so much. It's an honor that you feel like what we're doing is worth supporting. We're on a very significant question about the nature of hell and time spent there. So Kara, what's this bringing up for you?
The first thing that I think of when I think about this question is how deeply and highly the Lord values our spiritual freedom. And that is my sort of default position when I'm thinking about hell. He created us for heaven and he wants us there. And yet he loves us so much that he's going to let us say, no, thanks. I don't want to be there. So to me, the way Swedenborg paints hell is like a picture of divine mercy and letting us have our own choices in life. Then I come to the thought of how when we go to the other world and we have, and sort of the cares of this world sort of drop away and we're pure spirit and we get to take a look at our choices and what we really care about and what we love. And I always hope, in fact, Karin on a recent show used the term that any deficits in love will be filled on the other side. And I think, could it possibly be that if all of our deficits in love are filled from generations back, could anyone actually choose evil? So I struggle with it with myself, thinking if we really are surrounded by the highest angels and we're getting all the help that we can to think straight and feel the love, could any of us really say, yeah, I don't need that. So that's my personal struggle about just not understanding how it works. But bottom line, I believe in this merciful God who loves us and does not keep anyone in a state of suffering if they don't want to be there and are willing to do the work it takes to turn away from what makes us suffer. So awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I love getting to hear where you are on that. And yeah, that seems contrary to the divine nature. I know Karin, in the quote that you read, it talked about God's providence constantly laboring to mitigate the hell state through reducing insanity and reducing evil. And I forget exactly what it says, but something like that. I started thinking about constantly laboring. And let's say that I wanted to sculpt a great statue. I'm not good at that. But if I was constantly laboring forever at that, wouldn't I be able to do it, even though I'm not particularly artistically gifted? Would you bet against me constantly laboring forever to get that done? So if we're going to talk about like God, the smartest, most powerful thing that's ever existed, constantly laboring toward the goal of divine providence, which is a heaven from the human race, is God going to get a C or a D on this? Like if only 60% of people or 40% of people end up in heaven and the point of existence is heaven, something not like, and God has forever to work on it. the math doesn't add up. How is it going to be that if God is going to fail at that, God's main aim, how does anyone succeed at anything? Just in principle. So I don't know. There's a lot of different ins and outs of Swedenborg's material that shed light on this, but I keep coming back to that. It's like, that's like the front and center in God's strategic plan is heaven from the human race. God has resources. Yeah, we're stubborn, but I don't know. I don't feel like I would bet against God. Like, God's not going to sleep saying it's fine if I get 65% of people in heaven, So, Karin, you want to give us a final thought?
Yeah, three short thoughts. One, with what you were saying, Cara, is hard to imagine. That's why, for me, just the analogy of addiction helps, because we can know of people who they know this addiction to this substance is ruining their relationships, taking away their job, and yet they keep going to it. So why? So I feel like an addiction to evil is that you can have all the love, like here, somebody helps you and takes care of you and takes you to a rehab, but you just go right back. So evil is like that. Like, you can be given all the love, but keep being drawn back to that addiction to greed or revenge or whatever it is. So I feel like that's why people can still choose hell, even though the loving angels come to them and offer them everything. And then the mercy part is hell actually is a mercy from the Lord for people who heaven is painful for, because that's something Swedenborg talks about a lot. Like, when you don't want to face the truth about yourself, when you don't want to choose caring about other people from getting what you want, it's just like, get me out of heaven, get me out, and you're more at rest in hell. But the final thing is, I feel like there's things in spiritual diary that give me an interesting idea of how there might be this other kind of scientific process that the Lord allows people in hell to burn out. There's one phrase Swedenborg says that people cannot be out of hell until that life is extinguished. And from other things I read, it just seems like they just have to play it out. They have to burn like a burning coal in a fireplace. Like, it's not getting fuel from anywhere else except for, this limited thing. It has to just burn out and burn out and burn out and burn out until it isn't anymore. So somehow that life of loving evil has to burn out before the Lord could move to something else. And there's interesting, hard to understand descriptions in a couple of places in spiritual diary that lead me to think maybe something has to burn out, so there's nothing left but the remains, and then something else happens. and maybe something like that Isaiah prophecy of the wicked animals feeding alongside the tame animals, and they're just gradually starting to eat something else. And so anyway, something happens, but it's complicated because we have to be allowed to do what we want for as long as we want to. And I'll stop there.
Well, it's great. And it makes me think about a Superfund site where there's toxic waste of some kind, and they'll sometimes talk about that and say the radioactive waste that comes from thing X will still be dangerous for 10,000 years.
Yeah, right.
Wow. Yeah, great. But in 10,001 years, you can go play in it. So everything has, it's nothing in terms of eternity. Speaking of eternity, we've only done one question, and it's nearly halfway through. The good news is, as Chelsea was alluding to, we are getting closer to our goal of extending this by 15 minutes. So maybe we'll get an extra question or two in there, because Sean made a donation. Thank you so much, Sean. Yay. And Arun, A-R-U-N, made a donation. Thank you so much. We're up to, okay. And Arun's donation is in memory of Nira Aurora. So thank you so much for honoring her here with us. And then I just saw that Ruth donated. So now we have 175. We're getting very close. So let's step on the gas and get some questions answered. The next one is from Roy. Thank you. So obviously, thank you, Colin. That was a great question. And the reason why I think it was good for us to spend that long on it is it touches on what the nature of love is. It touches on what divine order is. There's so many key themes in Swedenborg's work. It's really multiple questions in one. So I loved that. Roy Engstrom asks, are we born with a core personality? And I think that's a great question. And it takes on extra meaning with Swedenborg's description of what consciousness is and heaven's influence on us and hell's influence on us. And even what Karin was saying about burning out the previous life and everything. So what's us and Chelsea?
Yeah, that's interesting. I do wonder about what Karin was saying earlier, and that's so interesting to think about. But yeah, I love the one place where Swedenborg says that we are a specific love of God. And then that has its wisdom matched to it. And then so that, I don't know what you'd call a core personality, or I don't know a lot I don't research what people say, what personality really means. I sort of get this sense of something that's been developed a little bit, but there is sort of, you are who you are. And I remember with my firstborn, introducing her to her great grandfather, and my grandfather saying to me about her, she is who she is already. Look at this personality. And I had never been a mom before, so I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. She just, it's a lot of work, and she's cute, but where's that unique, who's this person? I have to get to know this person. But now, as I've gotten to, see her grow, I realize, oh, wow, she's been who she is forever. The earliest little infant pictures of her, she's got that personality coming through this undeveloped blob. And so that is, I use the word personality and it seems to make sense to me. But then also, though, that we do grow, we have this ability to grow in love and wisdom forever. And so that's this infinite capacity that we get from the Lord. But so, yeah, I guess I do think there is something core there.
I love that example of the personality that shines through from the beginning. So there's, photo apps will do this thing where they say, remember these pictures you used to take? We have an app called Back Then where we share little pictures of our daughter with family, and it'll sometimes say, don't you want to see the change, how she's changed through the years? And I'm like, okay, fine. And those always get to me because they're just and you can see her personality as when she's little and tiny, and it's different, meaning how it's expressed is different because she's such a different thing. But there's this thing that is there, but rendered in the way of a 1-year-old versus. So I agree. And it's really powerful to see the way that exists. I want to talk about Yolanda. Thank you so much for your gift. We're at 200 right now. If anybody feels like, okay, $9 is worth it for this extra 15, you can be the one that puts us over the edge. offtheLeftEye.com/donate. Okay, let's get back to the core personality. Karin, what do you think?
Yeah, a little semantics here, but I'm wondering if you could think of it like we are born with a core identity. I'm just going to use the word identity for the core part with what Chelsea was talking about, which is a particular desire of God that manifested as us and got born as us. And that's something very core. And like you guys were saying, it's something you just can sort of see is there right away in this little new baby. There's something there that's very unique. And then as we grow, we get to kind of shape that with our own fun flavor and flair, and through the life we chose and the experiences we go through and what we take from them. And maybe that's could be more the word personality. Like you start out with this core spark from God, and then you get to play with it in your free will and do things with that. And we go through experiences. Lots of things happen that are not what we choose, but we always choose how to respond and what to take from it. And so that's what's developing our own, our own free will use of this core identity that we were born with. So maybe that's you could call that the personality and the other the identity or something. words. But I just imagine, God taking delight in putting a particular love, feeling, whatever, from God's self into manifestation into this free will little creature, and seeing what are they going to do with this? How cool. I mean, God knows everything already, but just the delight. Like if you were to be able to create a little character and you could see what it was going to do, like a story you wrote, and the characters could do what they wanted, and just the delight. I'm just imagining there must be a delight in that from God.
Oh yeah, major. And I think that when you have a little pet, like I think about when I had fish, and you've created this whole environment, you're just so excited to see them explore it. It's got to be something similar. Kara, what do you think?
The first thing that comes to my mind is when I'm trying to change myself, it feels so impossible to change myself. We talk about repentance and regeneration, and and I think that 20 years ago, I really handled, such and such an issue. And then 20 years later, here it is again. And I'm just unpeeling the onion. Like, do I ever get down to something different in this onion?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it feels like, no, I don't. This is me. And I have, all kinds of experiences, and I learn and I grow, but I'm still that onion, and I still have layers. I don't know. It's not a very reverent way to talk about it, but sometimes it feels sort of discouraging. And yet I keep carrying on, and I know the Lord is with me and he's guiding the whole thing. That's just a little emotional dump about it.
Yeah. I feel like honesty is reverent. So okay. I like it. I had a couple of thoughts. Swedenborg does give this interesting twist on the core personality, because what many of us would think of as what are the basic building blocks of my core personality is how am I feeling right now, and what occurs to me, what kind of ideas do I have, what kind of thoughts do I have. Yet Swedenborg makes this really fascinating claim that stuff in some way originates outside of you. It originates initially in God and then goes through different people in the spiritual world and kind of this mega neural network, and then reaches me, that you're not as original in that sense as you think. But then on the other hand, Swedenborg is talking to some angels, and the idea is brought up of two people who were exactly the same. And he says, I believe the word that's translated is horrified. The angels were horrified at the idea of any two people being identical. So we're not just a blank canvas that forces our working on, where there's enough differentiation points that you can have the 7 billion people who are alive today and all the people who have ever died in history. And according to Swedenborg, people that have lived in other parts of the universe, and every one of those is different. So we must be pretty complex if those can all be different. And I think about the regeneration work that you do and the choices you make, and it seems like each of us, you have infinite potential, but your potential is a different infinite potential than anyone's. Like going out, radiating out from a center, there's these wedges of the pie that can go on forever, but that wedge is yours to live into, because you, as Chelsea mentioned at the beginning, are this particular part of God, expression of a bit of God's love. And I think it's what Providence is trying to get each of us to do, is to live out into that wedge as much as we want, or we can just crunch down into a part of it. But yeah, because there's definitely this feeling of, well, I could be living up more to my potential, but sure. But you're the only one that has that potential. It's just you. Okay. So Karin, yeah, we want to give us one more.
Yeah. Think about, I thought of the concept of the dominant love, like you embody some yeah, some kind of love, and you express it in a unique way. But also what Cara was saying, I think maybe if you're, I mean, we are this unique being, and we're always going to be this unique being that has, and every kind of being has its strong points and weak points. So I think it's just a matter of not despairing over the weak points, and honing in on, appreciating and developing the strong points. So anyway, that's just an aside, that never be discouraged about who you are. Just know that those qualities are there for a reason. Like, they're really needed. They're really important, and they're really needed. And God is saying, I'm so glad you're the way you are, because the big picture needs you just to be who you are, to do this. And yeah, the uniqueness Curtis is talking about, like, there's all these ingredients, and we have these vast inner selves that we don't realize while we are on earth. We are aware of our outer self. We have this vast potential in our inner self, and it's just all these pieces put in to get together in a certain way that can't be like anyone else. And that can keep expanding forever. So that's some thoughts.
Yeah, and that just drives home the power of this idea that you have this unique space, and you may feel like you're nobody, but there's this area of life and love and wisdom that, Amelia Earhart can't do, and was the guy who climbed Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary, can't do, and anybody you think of that you feel like is smart and talented, we're all sitting on the sidelines. And if you can increase the overall success of life in a way that nobody else can. Hey, we did it. Kenny made a donation. Thank you so much, Kenny. With that donation, we're up to $315, so far exceeding our goal. Kenny made the donation in memory of Jan and Jet. So thank you so much for honoring them. And we're going to have extra time, so we can take a little breath and really focus on a couple of questions here. We're only on number 3. Okay, this is the in-depth episode. Yeah, Chelsea, do you want to say something?
Oh, I actually have a thought that I want to share, but it actually has more to do with the next question than this one, but it's in response to something Cara said. So.
Let me get this out of the way then. Just kidding. Peg B, who asks, and these are, of course, we're spending a long time on these questions. These are such hardcore questions. If God is perfect, why did he make imperfect people? Because sometimes you're out walking and you bump into someone who's imperfect, right? Okay, Chelsea, start us off.
Yeah. So, this is just a bridge. Well, it's in my mind because it's cool that like what Cara said in response to the last question and how it relates to this one is, those imperfect people out there. No, just kidding. Us. I think of that, Cara was saying, like, that cyclical way, the peeling of the onion, where it's still an onion, no matter how many layers you peel. It's like, if only I hadn't thought of it that way. Like, if you're peeling an onion, just sort of wishing that it would turn into an apple eventually. And it doesn't.
One more layer.
Yeah, maybe the next layer. So thinking of this, like, it's that whole kind of like paradox where we have strengths, but they can also be weaknesses, but they really are like two sides of the same coin. Like, I've been reflecting lately in my life where it's like, something that I really feel is like, it's kind of a crummy part of who I am, like this way that I have of being that could be obnoxious or whatever, something like that. I realize, wait, I guess it's kind of like the swan duckling thing. Like, if I am in the right environment and like the Lord kind of takes care of that in providence, then that thing that has been sort of this thorn in my side for a long time becomes, this is exactly the tool, the person, like things, that you need to be to do this work or to do this, serve in this arena or show up for this person or something.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Oh, no. Finish your thought, then I have something.
Okay. So just that's kind of so there's providence in that, but then there's sort of a freedom. I don't know, like the Lord kind of gives us everything we need. And then it just happens because we're humans, we go through a lot of awkward growth periods or something, and that's what can appear to be imperfect, but it's just like, well, we haven't learned how to use what we've got yet, like actually what we are is perfect, but we kind of just are fumbling in how how to exercise these limbs and parts of ourselves. So
well, this is great. I love those thoughts, and this is a great time to show you all how much of a master I am, because even before I knew this question was coming, I made a significant mistake that's showing you what imperfection looks like. So I was wrong. I said that Kenny gave in memory of Jan and Jet, but Kenny gave in memory of Jan. Okay, so thank you, Kenny, for that, and we're honoring Jan here. Jet also gave, so thank you, Jet. Thank you for your contribution. Please forgive my imperfection, which is just such a great example of it. While we're at it, thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer gave, and we are now up to $365.
Wow.
Thank you.
Despite our imperfections,
Yes.
we appreciate it much. Okay, so we're right smack in the middle of a really fascinating conversation. So I'm eager to hear Cara or Karan. Do you have any thoughts that Chelsea's have spurred, or the original question in you, Karan?
Only one can be perfect. Only God can be perfect. So an infinite being is the only perfect being, and an infinite being cannot create other infinite beings, because then it's not infinite anymore. So only God can be perfect, complete wholeness and everythingness. And anything that God creates is finite. Okay, finite is never all the way finished. We get to keep evolving forever, getting closer and closer and closer to God. The infinite, we can never become infinite, but we keep getting closer and closer and closer. So God created finite beings because that's the only way it can, that's the only thing that can happen. An infinite being can create other beings to love and to be in relationship with, but they have to be finite. They are not infinite. So God created finite beings, and we look at ourselves and see the flaws and everything, and like, why are we so imperfect? But we're just finite, and humanity kind of got tipped towards a lot of darkness in that finiteness. But finite doesn't have to mean full of negativity. It just that's what we're vulnerable to as finite beings. But God loves us. The Lord loves us so much, loves these little finite beings, loves these little imperfect beings. Just if you just think about, if there's a little child you love or a pet you love and they're not perfect, you love them, love them, love them. It doesn't matter if they make mistakes or get all messy or whatever. So yeah, we're just finite, and it's okay. And that's wonderful, because that means we can have the joy of keep evolving to a better state forever and ever and ever. And God's there to help us with that ongoingly. He will never stop helping us with that.
Woohoo. So good. So great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can I go, Curtis?
Yeah, you gotta go.
Okay. So,
Ooh, she's got it.
can't resist. I'm looking at the Latin word perficio, which is where our word perfect comes from. And the two parts of that word mean to do or to make, the ficio part, and the per means like thoroughly, all the way through. So if I'm just reading the first few definitions under perficio, we've got achieve, execute, carry out, accomplish, perform, dispatch, things like that. So all of us are in a constant state of doing those things: achieving, carrying out, performing. And we'll never get to the end of that because we have an eternal life. So our perfection is in just continuing to carry that stuff out. Just keep doing on it, keep working on it. We're a work in progress for eternity. So, a little comfort from the Latin dictionary.
Well,
that is comforting.
of course. That's why it's called the language of comfort. I think I might be perfect. I mean, let's think about what perfect is. Because sure, if I thought, oh, why aren't I perfect? I'd say, yeah, why am I losing my hair? Why haven't I gotten better grades more easily? But like, is that better? If I get that, is that better for everyone else? I mean, do you think of like, oh, that person who's good at everything, that's so perfect? Like, where does that perfectness end? I am perfect, a perfect like sort of point where heaven and hell can fight it out in this larger providential thing where God is ordering stuff, right? It just gets me thinking about what perfect for what, and if what I'm supposed to be doing is be this project that God is taking on to accomplish something. I don't even know, but it could be that we're all perfect for what that is. And I think about Jesus Christ's life. How did that life go? How was it? Was it perfect? If you just see it externally, yeah, he says some fairly clever things, but he gets mad at the money changers, and he obviously has his life cut pretty short. One of his best friends betrays him. I don't know, like, where's that perfection? So I guess it's like a snarky way to answer it, but it gets me thinking about there is a perfection. God created imperfect people because that's what a perfect system runs through. The perfection is in providence. I don't know. Okay, that's the end of my thoughts on that.
I definitely just love that idea of pooling together everything you guys have said and thinking about Kara's definition of that, like accomplishing, like, of course, like the work in progress thing is perfect, and that, the Lord makes us perfect. Anyway, yeah.
Cool. It's just that is the perfect, that the work in progress that you are is the perfect thing to accomplish you learning something or inspiring the next person or something, right? Hey, Sharon, thank you, Sharon. Sharon made a contribution. We're now up to $400 raised. Thank you so much. She had a message with it. As someone that really loves onions, I am deeply offended by this episode. Laughing. It's good. Okay, let's do the next one. This is from Blue Red, who asks, I understand that external knowledge is important because of its ability to contain God. But at what point do we leave it behind and start thinking what we really think and feel?
Wow. I have like a very initial thought on that.
Do it.
That I just want to put out there and then pass it on to somebody else who can think about it this more deeply. But in our show, The Psychology of Jesus, we talk about how Jesus's inner life is mapped in the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Joseph. And there's this thing about them going to Egypt and then leaving Egypt at some point, or somebody does, or a couple of people do. And Egypt is that corresponds to that like knowledge, that those important external knowledge vessels. And Swedenborg, I remember just being kind of blown away by what Swedenborg says about Jesus's inner process of leaving those behind, like of actually sort of leaving it behind, but really kind of like basically just the intentions around it becoming deeper and spiritual. And so only taking with it what really served that like higher inner intention that aligned with that, his divine inner self, that divine love. And so at what point, like, I'd be interested to go back and see when does that happen exactly in the story, what led up to it. I think there's something about the like battle, like inner battles that happen. So anyway, those are some initial thoughts.
Great. Oh, we're off on a good foot here. Karin, what do you think?
I'm thinking about our episode, How to Find True Intuition, and that the thing is, the question is asking, what point do we leave it behind and start thinking what we really think and feel? The thing is, we are multi-layered beings, and we have an outer self and an inner self, a lower self and a higher self. And we start out with those two not in sync, meaning the good version of the higher self, which has heavenly desires and heavenly goals and is connected with God. We start out with a lower self and outer self that is out of the divine design. And this just happened over the fall of humanity. It wasn't the way it was originally created, because our outer self is good in that it's just supposed to serve our inner self goals while we're in the world. And that's a good thing. But the thing is, our outer self, our lower ego starts out with kind of having this priority of wanting to get what we want and things to go our way, and being more concerned about materialistic goals and concerns than spiritual ones. And so in our early life, before we started on the journey of reformation and regeneration, what we really want is not in the divine design. It's not aligned with heavenly wants, which are altruistic, which are thinking of the big picture more than, our personal wants. So when we need external truth, information, things to learn that teach us about the divine design, like what should be our goals, like the golden rule, like the 2 great commandments, like the 10 commandments, don't do these things because they cause harm. So we need those concepts to teach our outer self, to teach us how to get back into the divine design. And that is and when we start living that, start doing that, turn away from the negative and according to the 10 commandments, turn towards the positive, according to the 2 great commandments and the golden rule and the teachings of Jesus. That information from outside of us is crucial to have, like, how do I get out of what I want on a lower, more selfish plane and go towards something heavenly. And the shift happens when you get to the point where the Lord is shifting your heart. Like, your heart is now not mostly wanting self-centered things or materialistic things. It's actually starting to mostly want, how can I help people? As you shift into that state of heart, you don't as much need to keep learning information, starting to flow more naturally through your heart, and you can be guided more and more. And it's a gradual process. So you can start wanting better things, but still greatly benefit from a steady diet of concepts to remind you to stay on this path. But that shift happens in the process of regeneration. So I think it's gradual. I don't know if you could pick like this one moment where it's shifting. It's gradual because we go a little forward, a little back, a little forward, a little back, but it's progress nonetheless.
Progress is good. Well, cool. Thanks for that map of the human journey. Cara, do you want to weigh in on this? Okay, then I'm going to. It's one thing that struck me about the question is external knowledge is important because of its ability to contain God. Seems to be juxtaposing that with internal knowledge. And this idea of a tree popped to mind. And I was like, well, why am I thinking about a tree? And Swedenborg says that trees correspond to firsthand knowledge of what's good and true. So instead of I have been taught about that, I know that I've experienced that. I know you don't have to tell me that there are armadillos. I've already seen one in the bush, So it sort of seems like it could be that Blue Red is hinting a little bit at when do we really, it stops being theory. When does it seems a little bit like the difference between perception, knowledge and perception. Swedenborg talks a lot about perception, and higher angels have perception. It's when you just get it and it's self-evident, even to the point where certain heavens that are really deep into perception don't want to talk about religion. They don't want to talk about theology or faith because it just disrupts this obvious. It's like we wouldn't want to talk about the theory behind why you want to eat. It just, or I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. So I don't know if that's quite the right analogy, but I just think it's an important slice of the world that Blue Red's asking us to consider here. Okay, let's move. Hey, we're in our bonus round. This round was brought courtesy of all those people who we talked about before, being willing to put their resources to make this happen. So thank you so much. And if you're watching afterwards, you can still go to offtheleft.com/donate and help our programming reach the people it reaches and help us do the next thing. This is Erica Lee for our first bonus question, who asks, why did Jesus say to God, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do"? How could he say that if God already knew that? And he is God. Was he trying to tell us that that's what we should say? It seems a little strange. Swedenborg is adamant that there's one God. God is one person. So are you talking to yourself? What's going on here, Jesus? Does anyone want to lead that off, Karin?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure that was part of it, Erica, that everything he was speaking was for the sake of us to learn something. And so it is very powerful teaching to have him there on the cross, completely betrayed and in terrible physical pain, and yet want the people who have done this to him to be forgiven and to recognize that they don't really realize what they're doing. So I do think that is definitely part of it. There's also this part of the journey of Jesus in this life, his life on earth that Swedenborg talks about, that Jesus was his development, just like we in our process of regeneration fluctuate between sort of higher realizations and then lower despair, where we don't know what's going on and we feel in a cloud and discouraged and things. Jesus went through that too, because he was walking the path of, with him, it was called glorification, the process of glorification. But he was modeling the journey of regeneration for us. And so he too went through the moments when everything was clear. The knowing of his divine soul was shining through and he fully felt it. And then he had other states of mind where his earthly self there in that physical body were clouded, like he wasn't able to feel that. And he was in a state of despair and feeling separated from his divinity, from his divine soul. So that's the times where he speaks of the Father as if it was somebody else, just because he wasn't feeling that connection yet. And I think during the crucifixion, it was his final temptation. It was the culmination. It wasn't his only temptation that was going on his whole life, but it was the culmination of everything. It was kind of like the last big thing before the process was over and he would be resurrected. So there on the cross, he was going through both, and so he's agonizing there, handling this terrible thing that's going on, and he is both. I feel like that statement both is allowing that divinity to come through in that wish for forgiveness, and also involving the limitations of Jesus not fully being divine yet, of just like, needing to ask for that, if you know what I mean. So I think both are in there.
Yeah, the exinanition and glorification. Kara, is that you're going to talk about that?
Yeah, you took the word right out of my mouth, Curtis. The word that is in the older translations for that state that feels more distant from God is exinanition. And Jonathan, in his translation of True Christianity, translates that as emptying out. So this state of, I think of it as emptying out the sort of natural human tendencies. He's working that out, and he's getting rid of those states in order to be able to be joined with God. So I really like the way Karin put it, but I had to say exinanition because you hardly ever get to say that.
I wouldn't have known that word if it wasn't for you NCE people in the first place. So, hey, before we go to Chelsea, let's just say that Erica gave. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.
Yeah, and John contributed as well.
Wow.
Our total is 445 now.
Wow.
Yeah. And John had a message for you, Karin. John said, "Thank you, Karin, for answering my email." Karin, as our community director, along with Kara and some other members of that team, really take it seriously as we all are behind talking to everyone. So that's one instance of that, and that's part of what everyone's contributions allows us to do, is to have it so that nobody has been moved by these ideas and wants to talk about it, and there's no one to talk to. Like, we want to make sure we can be there for you. So thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so Chelsea.
Here's another Latinate word, baby. Is it imputation? Is that a word? Okay. So the imputation of sin is what this brings to my mind in terms of it seems to touch into what Swedenborg talks about when do we do something that is sort of counted against us versus we might be involved in evil and doing evil, but it's not actually getting a deep mark on our soul or something in the same way. And the real, dividing line between those two is if we're doing it consciously, we're knowing it, we're knowing we're doing it and we're choosing it and we're doing it with intention. So that sort of forgive them for they know not what they do just reminds me, because Swedenborg says, like, somebody who might be acting out, doing something evil, or you can be believing something like that. It's not condemning, or it doesn't affect them, especially if they just don't know any better. There's just that when there's this severe lack of ignorance or this severe lack of knowledge, ignorance, then that can really make the difference in terms of, like, you don't know any better. So that's really not, that's sort of a loophole that the Lord gets away with, like, oh yeah, we're all sort of involved with evil or we do harmful things, but the Lord is still bringing us toward heaven, because so often it's because we just don't know any better. And if we did know better, we might do things differently. And so a part of that sort of application for me that comes to mind is of like what we should do, that also kind of connects to things Swedenborg says, is that we can't know that about each other. We can't make those kinds of spiritual judgments about other people. Somebody might do something that looks just, really bad on the surface. And as we can't know the thoughts and intents of the heart. Only the Lord knows that in this person. And so there's sort of this humility that is useful to have there. Like, we still, like Swedenborg says, it's of charity to make somebody accountable to the law. Like, you have to live, have boundaries and rules and laws in the world that keep people in check, so that they are punished for things they do. But on a spiritual level, we just don't know if that's what I mean by spiritual judgment. Like, we don't know, like we were talking about with hell, like, the Lord is working with that person. We can trust that the Lord's working with people, to bring them, to choose goodness and free them from the evil and falsity that's maybe taking control of their minds. And so it's an interesting thing to think about this prayer to forgive them for they know not what they do. Like, that's a really merciful perspective to have. And to kind of give, not like the benefit of the doubt, but I just sort of think to sort of leave open that crack, and then it gives us a reason to sort of like, Swedenborg, Curtis, you reference this a bunch, and I think it's so great when you say it, of like, when you doing something of charity or really loving somebody is like, yeah, putting them in jail for something they did, but then you care that they get better, or you want to support them in getting connected to goodness eventually. And that often involves teaching them, like, hey, this is why what you did was so wrong, and here's how you could behave differently or whatever. And so sort of having that intention to want to, leave open that possibility while we're alive in this world, that there's maybe hope for all of us, because we're all kind of, could use that hope. So
yeah, well, that's a great actual tie-in to our next question, because you're talking there about the reason why God can express love even through at times us being corrected is because God's thinking about the long game, and that we can be channeling some of that. God, if you're gonna have to learn a hard lesson here, but I'm not leaving you after that. I'm still with you. So this ties into true magnetic north, asking, if there is no time, are we already perfect? So God is outside of time. That's so weird. Swedenborg says, to God, the whole future is present. And we are on this trajectory. We were musing earlier in the hour about, does God eventually like get everybody out of hell and into this perfect heavenly state? Okay, so are we there? Is the time an illusion? Yeah. Does anyone want to open this up, Karin?
Yeah, I think, right. God sees everything. God sees the whole picture all at once. Think of maybe you were looking at somebody's life story, and while they were a certain age, got into all sorts of trouble and bad things happened. But then later in the life, like because of that, something huge was realized and a shift, or they could do, help in a certain way because of that experience. So you step back. So while you're in that point, like, oh no, this is terrible, this is so imperfect, what's going on here in this chapter of this person's life, but you step back and see the whole picture and say, whoa, that's perfect. This led to this, and this led to this, and that whole story is just right. And so I picture something like that with God. I don't know if this is actually answering the question, but I think, are we already perfect? I think the whole story is perfect. It's whole. It's doing things. It's productive. All these definitions that Cara was reading about the word perfect. And so you step back, and never mind we experience things linearly, but in the whole picture, like, yeah, it's perfect because it's all doing something. Like providence doesn't allow anything to happen unless in the whole story it was going to lead to the perfection of God's goals of building a heaven from the human race out of people who freely chose to be there, that kind of thing. And that has to involve allowing all these things that seem very imperfect to us, but stepping back, like that was the perfect way to have this goal be achieved. So there's some thoughts.
Yeah. This is one of those quotes that I have in my mind that it's like, it might be sort of Swedenborg derivative. I can't remember if Swedenborg actually wrote this somewhere or not. So maybe what you guys can remember.
Cara, can you just stick it in one of his books?
Yeah. So it's that God sees us, or is it that the angels see us? I feel like it must be God sees us the way, not as we are, but as the Lord wills us to be.
Is this how God sees heaven that way? Yep.
Okay, right. So that sort of idea of the way the Lord sees us is the way the Lord wills us to be. And we look pretty good, in that case. So in that case, we are already perfect. So like Karin was saying, that's the way the Lord sees us, is how the Lord wills us to be, in that, like, not like, oh, I just wish you were different, but like the work that the Lord is doing in that, and for our own satisfaction, as well as for everybody else's benefit. So yeah,
that's great. Any other thoughts on that? I loved what you said, Karin, about the episodes seeming imperfect and then becoming perfect later. I was recently playing a video game that Matt, a valued member of our team, helped hook me up on. It's like a virtual reality game. So you have this little thing on your head and you look around, and there's a part in it where these people are coming and they're going to lock me up and put me in jail, and they're capturing my dad. And I wasn't worried at all because I know I'm the protagonist and the story is going to go on. So there's something to be said that actually with providence ensures that we are all the protagonists of the story is going to continue on. So I just want to say that. Speaking of continuing on, man, I don't want to, this last question, we only have 1 minute. Okay, let's just do a lightning round on it. Come on.
Yeah.
Someone think of some kind of quip. This is from Young at Heart, who asks, what should we say when a family member, Uncle Joe, states that mystical Christianity, such as Swedenborgianism, is bogus or heretical? What do we say at Thanksgiving when you say, I've been watching this stuff on YouTube, it's Swedenborg, and he saw what spirits, what? That's not canon. And anyone have any thoughts on that?
Because start with some questions like why? How does it conflict with the teachings of Jesus? How does it conflict with loving God and the neighbor?
That's good. Okay, Cara.
Swedenborg talks about how all of us have flowing into us the idea of God and that God is one and that God is speaking to us all individually in terms of whatever we come across. So what occurs to you as living and true and clear is your business.
Nice.
Very good. Yeah. Chelsea, do you have a closing thought on that?
Just thinking, like, I would just ask, what makes you think that?
Yeah.
And all those.
Also, mystical Christianity, meaning like out of spiritual experiences. Well, if we're going to say we don't like mystical Christianity, you better throw out Ezekiel's stuff. You better throw out John on the Isle of Patmos. You better throw out, who else is it? Isaiah. Get rid of him. He's a mystic. There's all these mystics. Right?
Yeah.
Get rid of Ruth and everybody. Christianity is, get rid of Paul. Didn't he get pulled up in the air for 3 days? Okay, if we're going to throw out mystical Christianity, throw it all the way out. Don't just say, because you're not used to, of course. And this is actually better that Swedenborg is saying is coming at Christianity mystically, because you got somebody like your Martin Luther, who probably is who this family member follows, right? Because it's not Christianity, it's Luther's interpretation of it, or it's Catholicism. Those Luther didn't even have, well, maybe it isn't even saying that he got his theology in the same way the prophets got theirs through this mystical experience, right? It's just somebody thinking it up. So I would say, yes, Swedenborg is weird, but it's very much in line with the Christian tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. Peter had visions too. There a lot of visions in the early Christianity.
Too late. The genie's out of the bottle. Everybody's having visions. Okay. That's it. We're past the end of our hour, but come on. We more than owe it to y'all to give you an extra minute or two. Hey, we raised $445 today from 12 donors, 5 of which this is their first gift. So welcome to our community of donors, returning gifters. Thank you. You make what we do possible. That was great. Thanks, panel. That was really fun getting to chat with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for your financial gifts, for being here, for your wonderful questions, for your tributes to loved ones. So great to talk with you during this hour.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. It sometimes feels like we're not necessarily giving a satisfactory answers, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love getting to be here and getting to have my own mind blown by all of your responses to these questions.
Hey, the fun doesn't stop here. We have coming up on Sunday. Podcast Sunday. So this upcoming episode, hosted by Chelsea, is the second coming and how Swedenborg's idea of God changed. What can listeners expect if they head over to our podcast channel?
Yeah, there's lots of good things. So Curtis will be there, and Dr. Jonathan Rose, and we go on little time traveling adventures to the context around Swedenborg's books, and then there's a special interview this week with the Swedenborg Foundation's longest continuous donor supporter, and so we probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for this woman's support for decade after decade, and so come hear a little bit about what that means to her. Her her name's Frida Browse. So it'll be great to share it with everybody.
Exciting. And what can inspire somebody to commit, that much? I think next week we have a show. After that, on Monday, we have a show coming up. That's what I think. I think it's about spiritual communion.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right.
How spiritual communion works.
Yeah, I just suddenly was like, oh, wait. Next show is how spiritual communion works. And that is going to be an awesome companion to the baptism show, but it stands on its own. It's the power of this really crucial part of the regenerative process and how the outer and the inner can be in correspondence. So don't miss that, or don't miss anything ever in any part of life. Okay. There, we'll send out on that. Thanks, everyone. Great talking to you today.